All right, guys. How's it going? Welcome to another Note to File Live. Uh, got some people set up here. Guest's already ready to go on. I'm excited about it. It feels like it's been a super long week already. I literally had a sponsor send 4 monitors at one time for 3 days on site. Craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. But anyways, I'm gonna jump right in. I'm hoping to, obviously hear whatever's on anybody's mind out there. Leave a comment. Feel free at any time. I want to hear a little bit about SCRS last week. I know e-consent something I've been kind of harping on lately, but I'm going to jump right in here. Dr. Fox, throw you in the stream here. Hey, man.
Hey, how's it going, Brad?
Good. How are you?
Doing all right. Just recovering from a lot of travel over to Florida.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I've realized I could never be a CRA. Traveling just like completely exhausts me. I just takes it out of me.
Yeah, and Florida's a different culture. It was beautiful weather, but coming from the Midwest, going over to like Florida, where you breathe and you have to pay a fee, it gets pretty crazy. So
Fair enough. Well, I mean, you're in Florida for SCRS, and is it your first one? Have you been to?
not the global one. Not the global one. The global one, this is my first time, and everyone that I talk to say that this is a really good first one to be at. Record numbers, a lot of energy, a lot of people.
Yeah,
it was interesting.
I know it was their 10-year anniversary kind of shindig there, so I'm sure that also made it a little extra. So that's cool. I mean, what do you feel like? What'd you learn? What'd you take away? What was your kind of overall impression of SCRS?
Overall, a couple of really interesting tidbits here and there. The site summit survey that came up at the very beginning, it was showing a lot of the very similar trends that we've been seeing over the past few years. I always pay attention to that, number of, or percentage of sites who have 90 days cash on hand, or less than 90 days cash on hand. It actually dropped a little bit. It actually went just slightly under 60 for the first time ever, which we're going to the right direction. They also they took another measurement on AR, number of days in AR, and of course that's my big heart too. Is how long does it take us to get our money? And yeah, like average number of days of AR is well over 50 days. And so if you're like over that, then it's pretty crazy. And even a lot of the SCRS people said, if we're in healthcare and you saw this we'd be in a crisis right now. This is not good stuff. So surveys are great. Energy was great. Ironically, the DCT bubble was kind of like meh. It was kind of in the forums. They're still talking about DCT, but nowhere near what it used to be. And I know there's actually one interesting interaction between a sponsor and a site is like, in one of the breakout sessions, and this is getting kind of contentious. And the sponsor was literally like, okay, aside from money, what is wrong with DCTs? That was the question. Like, aside from money, what's wrong with this? And so it just turned into a whole, but time and time again, I think you're finding people, they're saying DCTs cost like quadruple what a standard trial is now. And I think the numbers are starting to go through, which it's kind of like it's good to be there when you need it. And we can do it in a pinch, but maybe it's not the gold standard that everyone was saying it was. And I think that, when you see like a lot of the big decentralized companies that inflated during COVID and are now deflating, kind of changing their mind, we're seeing kind of that. Technology wise, I think the big theme was EMR scrubbers. Big one, EMR scrubbers for recruitment. Give us the keys to your EMR. We'll give you some patients and we'll take all your patient data and sell it.
Yeah, I saw you make a post about that, and that's something I've been looking at, for a little while as well, and sort of wondering if there is, some backdoor shenanigans going on there.
Oh, well, I mean, look at the business model and look at how fast these guys are growing. I actually had a follow-up to the conference just recently, and they were explaining their big EMR scrubber. This is what we do. This is how we help you. And I just looked at them and I said, when I bring this to the administration, they're going to ask me, they're going to want to know why we're not making the money. Why do we have to give you that money? If the patient, if the data is worth that much, then so EMR scrubbers are one thing. The other big thing that's really coming through the pipeline right now, and I'm so glad Stephanie's here, is single sign-ons. So some of the big pharmas started bringing out their single sign-ons. It's great if you only work with one pharma, but it's still kind of top-down technology. And so as a result, we'll see where it goes. But at least they're kind of getting the hint. Portal fatigue's a thing. We want to be conscious of that. We want to help you. Maybe we can compile all of our 17 logins into one single portal. I think you're going to be seeing that go. But overall, very good, very energetic summit. There were a lot of sparkles, a lot of chocolate bars. And I don't want to say anything else because I'm hoping someone else might want to be. Is anyone here who wants to speak?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I was trying to get sort of I saw a lot of pictures and it's cool, but I always like to hear, I want to hear a little bit about, a little more depth into, some of this stuff. I wasn't able to make it, unfortunately. But seems like there was certainly, to your point, a lot of energy, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm. It was, and it was really cool. Just sit there and talk to the sponsors, because you don't get to do that a whole lot. I mean, I chaired a round table and there were sponsors in the whole table. And when we were talking about some of the conflicts of the site, they looked at me and said, I had no idea any of this was happening. And I said, well, look to your CRO friends. They don't let you know about it. They don't let me talk to you. And obviously they don't tell you. So, there's a break in communication here. So
I find it hard to believe that they don't know that. But I guess, to your point, if there's sort of somebody running interference in the middle, then I guess it makes sense. But seems like it's also good due diligence for the sponsors to actually check out and find out what's happening on sites as well.
Mm-hmm.
So do you feel like it was well, that's kind of stuff's well received in general, or does it become contentious at any point or at some points?
Some of the breakout sessions, there were a couple uncomfortable conversations like that one I was talking about, but the energy in the room is literally just everyone's mingling, talking, and sometimes we talk about solutions. They say in the very beginning, one of the big rules is there's no witching allowed. So it's like, I know that we're going to be complaining about everything, but at least we can walk away maybe trying to fix things. So no, overall, positive energy. And it was a great venue to have these very difficult conversations. So that's what I thought. So hopefully maybe see you next time, huh?
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I just don't love traveling, period. So I limit it as much as I can, but it's just my own thing. So cool. Yeah. I mean, the only other thing, again, do you have any experience or any input on sort of what the state of e-consent is for us? We're doing a lot of sort of surgical device trials. They tend to be real close to standard of care. A problem we sometimes have is that we don't know about a potential patient until after they've left the clinic. They live 2 hours away. They're not going to come back to do a consent visit. We are oftentimes trying to catch them like day of surgery, which is a nightmare. Even though we've talked to them, it's still challenging to try to do. So trying to implement e-consent from the site, under like sites management, so to speak, rather than being, handed by a sponsor. So that's kind of the framing. So that's where I'm interested in hearing people's input on what's worked and what hasn't.
Yeah. So a lot of the energy from at least the conference on e-consent revolved around just kind of like acceptance, and kind of what you're saying is similar to what a lot of the industry is saying. There's not as much of an adoption toward e-consent as we would have liked to see. I mean, the technology is there. The FDA has provided the green light. We have guidances on it. People have authored it. There's a new global GCP training consortium coming in 2023, and you better bet e-consent is going to be right up in front on that. So, I mean, we need to adopt it. And so now it's just a matter of asking ourselves why it's not happening. So maybe like, for example, from your perspective, from your site's perspective, that's kind of like a lot of the conversations that were coming through. What are the holdbacks? What are the walls or the barriers that we have to look at so that we can try to adopt this technology it is going to revolutionize research? It's just a matter of doing it.
Sure. Well, and even like, we've got some willing sponsors at this point, so that's great. But now it's like, okay, well, what, how does the site like provide that through what, partnerships with what kind of vendors? I mean, I guess you can be as simple as, DocuSign's got 21 CFR 11, I believe, compliant service or whatever the case may be. So now I'm at the kind of the point of like weighing in on who's good, what makes sense, what fits in with good with the site workflow. Can we do it inside CTMS? Can we do it a whole separate vendor? That's kind of the stage. And as we've seen, there's like a ridiculous amount of vendors coming to the market now, which doesn't make it easy because nobody's out there saying this vendor's great and this one sucks. And it's kind of hard to tell.
I agree. And that definitely causes some confusion. But the cool thing is, and so a lot of the people that I work with as well, it used to always be, oh, no, we don't want to do e-consent. We don't trust it. There's a lot of different things that do that. But just the fact that we're questioning it, saying, well, let's give it a try. We may actually be trying it on some of our earlier sites, some of the really easy studies, like, little blood draws, one out, something like that. We might try to dip our toes in the water for e-consent just to understand the processes, to understand the challenges that we might have. Reconsents on long-term trials, you're gonna have to have logistics behind that. We're gonna have to, get all of our policies in place. But they said this about DCTs, and I don't know if that, DCT is the way of the future for research, but e-consent may actually have a little bit more traction on that. I think that you're going to see in 2023, it's going to become an accepted standard in many different ways for research. The people who adopt e-consent are going to be far more efficient. They're going to have higher enrollment rates. They're going to have save costs. It is going to happen, just like, the days of the healthcare, right? The EMRs and everything. That technology, and you've identified how efficient it's going to be. I think that we're all going to be like, yeah, let's do this. But just got to talk people into it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that time. I guess, it's just where we are on the sort of adoption curve, so to speak. So it's fun times, interesting times.
Yeah.
All right, Daniel, anything else to weigh in before I boot you out and move on down my line here?
Kick me out. I want to hear another person.
Make sure and go check out Dr. Fox with Dan Sfera. I saw that drop this morning. I've only made it about halfway through just because my day's been insane, but cool conversation, and go check it out if you haven't already.
I can't hit me up offline. There's something I'd like to talk to you about. Make your day a little crazier, right?
Perfect. It's exactly what I need.
Thanks, Brad.
Shoot me a text.
All right.
Later, man.
Bye.
All right. Very cool. Always glad to hear from Dr. Fox. Next, Stephanie Abbott.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good. How about yourself?
Oh, I mean, I can't complain. I do anyway, but probably shouldn't. It's good. I guess give yourself a little brief introduction. I think it's the first time on for you, so tell the people a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I have been in the industry for 20 years. I am a PharmD by training, so I'm a pharmacist that has spent time in all aspects. And not only have I built research centers within clinics and regional medical centers, but now I'm part of a site network, kind of like you are. And we're trying to get everybody together to march in unison. And when you have a network and you have technology platforms, you kind of get the opportunity as well to leverage some of that network to establish efficiencies. So that's kind of where we are. I absolutely love what you're doing and the different aspects that you're highlighting. It's really, really been essential for our voice in this industry. So again, thank you.
My pleasure. I don't know what else to be other than a pain in the ass. So it's just what I do. But I think it's really interesting because there's so many different like site models, and I guess different different levels of leverage, so to speak, that can be sort of used or not, depending on what your site model is and what kind of clout you may have. So it's just really interesting to me, and also still not being sure on where the sort of like who's going to drive the bus here, right? Is it going to be the vendors or sponsor side, or will it be the site side? I think that's still up for debate. Agree. I mean, would you agree or disagree with that?
Well, I think that it's up for debate, but I think it's going to be a collaborative effort. I mean, nobody can just drive it, and in the
Sure.
past, it's been all sponsored, and the very top down, kind of what Dr. Fox was talking about, that's been our experience, and it's not working awesome. So it's time to kind of go back to the drawing board. And being at SCRS, one of the things that was kind of interesting talking to the administration there was that here this was their 10th year. And initially it was almost all sites, and you had your vendors in the exhibition halls and you had sponsors, but it was almost entirely attended, by sites. That was the focus. And now it's really evolving. And they were saying it was actually like half and half. And so much of the discussion was, okay, how are we going to solve this together? So that's kind of a refreshing change that I've seen over the last, 10 years. And of course, organizations like SCRS have been amazing as far as, forwarding that conversation and making the evolution happen.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, to your point, I think it's getting a little bit better, at least from the optics are better, right? It looks like there's a lot
Yeah.
more a collaboration. It's hard to say how that's turning out to, or if it's had much of an effect yet. I think we'll continue to see that sort of compound as time goes by. But it's a really interesting time too, where there's so many more vendors and service providers sort of coming to the market. So I think it's kind of an interesting time, and maybe it's just a particularly good opportunity to sort of get back on track, because to your point, it has been all top down, really. I mean, historically, sites are just sort of, and even I still fall into the trap of like, okay, I'm just going to do whatever you tell me. Just
Mhm.
give me whatever stuff to use, and I guess I'll use it. And I'm just going to shut up and do my job. But I legitimately think that will continue to evolve. So, I mean, what kinds of things are you seeing, or I guess, have you had an opportunity to maybe use some of that leverage to the advantage of the site?
Um, I think so. I mean, it's just, back to your point about being a pain in the ass. That's something that I adhere to nicely as well. And just pushing back to see, like, how far can I push? And trying some of our own solutions, and what's accepted, what's not accepted, and how can we simplify and make this easy. For the most part, though, in this industry, I've always had, they have their ways of doing things, and there's a lot of workarounds that you have to do to make sure that your staff can actually recreate this workflow that's necessary for this crazy study and all of their logins and passwords. But that there's a lot of movement, and there's a lot more technology now that didn't exist before. That we have our CTMSs and eSource type of vendors that help to support the site and the network. There are still missing pieces within that we've had to create additional workarounds for, but it's definitely a start.
Yeah, it's interesting to me how, like, being a study coordinator is, I mean, it's like being a project manager.
It
I
is.
mean, it's there's so many kind of balls to keep in the air. It's I think sometimes underappreciated how much just how much stuff a CRC has to deal with. I mean, it is pretty wild. I mean, have you guys had much? Again, my big like deep dive lately has been on the e-consent side. Have you had any experience with, or just even general thoughts about sort of the institution of e-consent from the site side? Again, versus sponsors saying, "Here's your e-consent provider. Good luck." I mean, have you had any experiences there?
Absolutely. We've actually had 3 good sized studies with 3 different e-consent vendors on it. And it was one of those scenarios that I just kind of dreaded, to be quite honest. I mean, initially, that was my initial thought is, oh no, another thingy. This is going to be complicated. This is going to be hard. But surprisingly, I had the completely opposite experience, to the point where actually right now we are working with an e-consent vendor, and within our network, we've taken a trial that we've been already enrolled about 400 or 500 patients on. And, so we're about halfway through the trial, and now we're adding on e-consent to go essentially the rest of the way to compare and contrast. And it was kind of interesting because the first study that we were on, and it was just as the pandemic was hitting. So nobody was coming into the clinics. All of our research was shut down. You know, there was all this discussion about DCT and nobody had actually ever really seen one. And, you know, we were working with they're actually a partner with our network, a rather large, you know, tech company, and they have, you know, an EMR to EDC type of a tool. And we were doing the proof of concept study, and, you know, I was the PI on it, and we're pretty much all, you know, shut out of the clinics. Like patients weren't coming in, all of our research was shut down, and they were kind of delaying. And I was like, you know, there's really no time like the present. We can do this completely remote. Why don't we see if DCTs are really a thing, or if it's just something that everybody's talking about? We were able to enroll 25 patients on this proof of concept study in a handful of weeks. And, you know, granted, it worked out in our favor in that everybody was home. You know, everybody was home because everything was locked down. And when, you know, they saw our you know, my ID pop up as being the medical group, they were more than happy to answer the phone and also to pick my brain on everything else, you know, relating to the circumstances. But I thought it was going to be complicated, you know, and difficult for the patients, and that I was going to have to be like IT help desk, which is what I have to do on a lot of studies, which is aggravating and annoying.
Right.
But that wasn't the case. And like I said, we were able to enroll that quickly. So it proved to be a great thing. So it's like, okay, well, that was that experience. That was fantastic. But, you know, is it reproducible? Because obviously, you know, that's something that we have to do. So then we ended up with another study, and we ran it across all of our network, and we were able to enroll 900 patients in roughly a year with 5 of our sites. And it had an e-consent component to it. And it, again, was surprisingly simple. Like, it didn't require us to play IT help desk. And I think this is the part that we really need to get militant about, is the expectation that it's like, okay, I have an iPhone. I've never downloaded the manual. Everybody's tech should just be intuitive and should work. But that's not typically what we see in our industry. So with this particular study, it was kind of interesting. It was a biospecimen study in conjunction with a standard screening procedure. We had another study that had a paper consent that was another company that was looking at the same thing. We were running both protocols. You know, you could enroll the same patient on both protocols because there's no investigational product involved in, you know, checked it with both sponsors, IRB, making sure it's all good. So what was interesting is the patients that were already on the study with the e-consent would consent to the paper, but it was much harder to do it the other way around. And so the one with the e-consent actually drove enrollment on the other one. And then of course the one with the e-consent finished so much faster. So that study is actually still going like 8 months later, and no longer has the benefit of the other study to kind of help pull it along, which was kind of an interesting aspect. So that's another example of where it was extremely helpful. The coordinator.
Yeah, and I think I know what studies you're talking about. I think we've worked on some of that stuff. So and I do think there are those studies especially have some things about them that specifically make them very well suited for e-consent. I don't know that I can say that about, you know, other types of studies, and we're sort of seeing. I want to, if it's okay, I don't want to cut you off, but you're getting some questions here on the side that I do want to pop up a little bit. You know, just from LinkedIn user. I don't know why it doesn't say the name, but do you find that, you know, e-consent are cost effective?
So in this case, the e-consent was provided to us. So it was no specific cost to us. As far as the cost effectiveness of the trial, yes. I mean, it was hugely cost effective in that we were able to enroll quickly. The coordinators, which is why we're doing this secondary pilot with an e-consent vendor, is the coordinators were saying, I'm surprised at how much I liked it. And the patients that were e-consented would be in our office 30 minutes. The ones that weren't would be in an hour and a half. And so it was a significant burden on the staff in the office with patients that had paper consent as opposed to e-consent. So kind of an interesting
Yeah,
aspect.
and I'm interested to know. I mean, if there are any sites out there who have paid for their own e-consent solution, because I just still think that's an interesting question from a site perspective. If they're sort of footing the bill themselves, I'm still trying to kind of research that myself. So if anybody is, hit me up. Also, if you're interested in coming in and contributing to the conversation, shoot me a message on LinkedIn and I'll get you a link, just kind of as an aside. But Nelson always has awesome questions, and why do you think the industry needs to adopt e-consent, and do we need to similarly adopt putting consent forms on websites to review in advance, or is that different? I think two interesting but different questions. I mean, look, I don't know. Actually, you go ahead if you have your thoughts. I'm curious to hear if you think is this something that we just need to adopt e-consent across the board.
We do, and some of the solutions already have it. So we're actually in a position to purchase our own e-consent solution through our CTMS provider. But we haven't done it yet, so I can't tell you what that looks like as far as cost effectiveness piece of it. But I do think that it is something that needs to happen. I don't know so much about posting the consent forms on a website. Typically, we have a conversation with a patient. We give them the summary of it. We we email them the consent form. That's all stuff that you could do with the e-consent platforms too, as far as sending it out. So they have an opportunity to really look at it. And what was the other aspect of that question that I'm missing?
I mean, I think you pretty much
okay.
kind of nailed both sides.
Yeah. Okay.
And,
but it's definitely lends itself to facilitating getting the form to the patient, because it's not just paper, and getting it to them in advance to review before they sign. So, from that standpoint, I think it's really helpful for actually facilitating the informed aspect of the informed consent process.
And I'll be honest, I'm kind of mixed on both questions. And I think because for some studies, e-consent makes a lot of sense. And I think for some studies, it doesn't make as much sense. And I also think it depends on how you're delivering e-consent versus remote consent, I guess, is another maybe important distinction to make. Like, just because it's doesn't mean it has to be done remotely necessarily. I guess there's a difference between being electronic and being remote. But for many pharmaceutical trials, there may be some disadvantages to doing a remote e-consent, because your clock starts ticking immediately. And if the patient doesn't show up or eventually come to you or do the things that they're supposed to do, then you've got sort of, you're kind of back to a bad situation. You're going to be screed failing a lot of patients. So I think that's sort of a potential downside. And I do think that there's some things that are better done in a conversation versus, the urge you may have to shoot somebody an electronic document and then sort of unload the burden on them to figure it out. And again, not that should be the practice, but and then I'm always torn about, getting out consent forms on a website, or even sometimes giving them to patients in advance, simply because, again, I think there's some of our documents are 49 pages.
Yep.
If you shoot somebody a 49-page document, they're going to say, what the hell? And they're going to start thinking in terms of legalese, and it's going to become a blur to them, So I think providing context can be really important. Now, perhaps e-consent can be reimagined in a way that it's not a 49-page document anymore. Maybe it's video, maybe it's audio, maybe it's other ways that make it more accessible. I don't know.
I don't foresee that changing as far as the length, but the palatability and the ability to facilitate the understanding, I think, is better there. And within the e-consent platforms, you can do televisits as well. But kind of the caveat, as far as I don't quite understand the perspective of having it on a website. I wouldn't want them to be so available without that interaction, because, like, to your point, people's eyeballs glaze over, or they get scared by all the weird legalese, and then it just seems daunting, or they just look at it and they're like, this is way too many pages to read, I guess never mind. So typically, before we give a patient a consent form, usually it's a conversation. You give a summary to the patient so they could decide, is this really something that interests me? Then, when you go through the full consent process, you're paraphrasing each section so that and summarizing it so that the understanding is there. And of course, then they have access to the actual document. So typically, what we would do is we would do that and send it in an email with like the highlight points, and then, like letting them know you'll be receiving a link for your e-consent as well. Call me if you have any additional questions.
Yeah, and the only I guess defense I would have of having it available, maybe even on a website. Look, it's tricky, right? Because you want patients to have the options, and some of them don't want to talk to me. First, they want to review it themselves.
Yeah,
they do want that opportunity. So I think we shouldn't necessarily gatekeep the opportunity for them to review a consent form if they just want to review it on their own.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a fine line to walk, and I think you kind of have to, I guess, read that a little bit as a study coordinator, which seems like a crazy thing to say, but I mean, you have to sort of be able to read that situation, and but again, I think there's a hesitancy to at least just sort of willy-nilly throw it out there. And again, yeah, I think it's way too easy to open up a 50-page consent form and be like, nah, I'm not reading this.
Yeah, well, and we do get, to your point, we do get patients like that too, that, the doc mentions it to them when they're in the exam room and they're like, I don't want to have I don't really have time, or I don't have can I just get a form that I can read and call you? So, we end up doing it that way too. But if they could just access it on a website, I think that would be a little, probably a little daunting. I have never seen that actually happen, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't.
Well, and to that point, I mean, I've considered trying to have that level of transparency because when they're IRB approved, there's no reason they can't be out there to where someone can see. But again, I think it's sort of it's like a slippery slope. Like, again, you just don't know how it's going to be looked at.
Well, and the updating of it too. It's like if you put it on your website and somebody accesses it and then they update the consent form, it's like you want to make, so it kind of becomes that.
It's another place to have to keep up with and keep accurate. Fair enough. Well, okay. Anything else? Oh, I mean, I thank you for hopping on. I'm going to probably boot you off here in a second and move on down the line, but I think we have a call right after this. So
yeah. I think we do. So great. Well, thank you so much. And I'll look forward to talking to you again.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie. I mean, in the meantime, there's a lot of questions coming in. I'm sorry. I'm like terrible multitasker, apparently. Nelson always asks really awesome questions. Fascinated by the claim that e-consent leads to faster enrollment. I mean, again, I think it depends. I don't know. I think that there are a segment of trials where that's probably true, but I also think there's a segment of trials where that's completely the opposite. I think it's going to potentially complicate things, beyond what's necessary. Lisa, don't understand the hesitancy around e-consent. Clinical side's done this. It's a lot of paperwork to carry around and lose. Well, I mean, that's fair. I mean, also, it feels like there's already a lot more tools and support for like the clinical side versus research. Maybe I'm wrong there, but a lot of that stuff's already implemented well into a system that keeps everything together. And right now we're still spread out across all kinds of different platforms. I don't know that them getting lost is really necessarily a concern, but I don't know. There's why is there hesitancy for a lot of things? Like, we should be doing a lot more things electronically. So that's I don't necessarily disagree with you there. All right, I'm going to jump on Steve here because I really haven't seen enough Hawaiian shirts today.
My guess is that number is below 1, and now it's not. So here we go.
Correct. Smart man. Steve, how's it going, man?
Pretty good. I know we had talked about maybe talking about SCRS stuff, but I did have one contribution to the e-consent conversation, and it is a little bit sample size of 1, some me search. I was in a study, and the initial consenting was done in a cohort, which I thought was interesting. So it was me and like 15 other people in a room with iPads, kind of listening to the person go through the consent. We signed it. And I came back I don't know, a couple months later, and they handed me a big stack of paper, and they were like, "Hey, you need to sign this." I'm like, "Oh." Being the astute observer of humanity that I am, I was like, "Well, why is this not on the iPad like last time?" And the CRC said, "Well, we found it's easier for people to flip through and sign it if it's on paper." And I was like, "Okay, good, all right." So expediency rules all in that instance.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds almost counterintuitive, but it's also, I think it is true. It's easier to flip around. And yeah, I don't know, man. Again, I'm so back and forth on the whole idea. It's I hate that it's like that I have to be like an old man that's like, paper is good, because I mean, generally I don't think that's the right way to go. But it's interesting that they
Sure.
took that route. They were just like, nah, we're going paper now.
we just want people to fly through this. I mean, I thought like maybe if there's something different that matters, like just point that thing out instead of making me sign like 40 pages. Because all of it didn't change, I'm sure. But yeah, I didn't read it.
Well, and frankly, a good, I mean, I don't want to say good, but a coordinator who gives a shit is probably going to say, look, here's what's different. Here's why we're signing a new consent form. A lot of times it's some minimal language that maybe is administrative or whatever the case may be, but I think it still should be, on there, should be up to them to explain that. So that's kind of weird, but such is life. Tell me about SCRS. Was this your first one?
This was my first one for sure. So yeah, for me, it was more of a learning situation. I work at a vendor company, so not a sponsor, not a CRO, not a site. And really our clients are more on the industry side than they are at the site level, although we work with sites, so we do patient recruitment. So for me, I just wanted to go and kind of understand like that world a little bit more. I think I've been experiencing, do you know the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Basically, or you think I'm going to say it like an idiot.
So for anyone watching, when you're new to a field, you overrate your abilities because you don't know how much you don't know. And then you learn a little bit more and you're like, oh my God, I know nothing and I'm terrible at this. And then eventually you become an actual expert. So there's this weird curve of confidence versus competency. And I think after this, I've been in the industry for 3 years and feeling like, oh, I think I know some things. And now like just in my third year, I'm like, oh, wait a second, I don't know anything. So the very first session I was Googling like what a holdback was because people were talking about site budgets. And I was like, I don't know what this term is. So I'm like searching. I'm like, oh, they just get to keep some of the money. That seems dumb.
Yeah, so, that's a thing. That's a thing.
Yeah, Dr. Fox was on earlier talking about some of the general energy. Yes, agree. It felt very like well produced. Like I've been to some of these conferences that's just like a bunch of people standing around a box of bagels in like a sad hotel room, and so this was cool in a sense. Like it was produced. I felt like it was for the sites. Like I know a lot of the people who are pumping money into that are sponsors and CROs, but it felt like at least it's hard for me to know the intention behind the messaging, but the messaging was very much around like, we care about sites. We want you to have a voice. So I learned a lot. And yeah, I feel like I didn't know about like poaching. People were talking about poaching, like industry coming in and taking CRCs and CRAs and stuff. That was new to me. I didn't know why. I think I had some inclination, but a lot of sites like really don't like third-party recruitment, centralized recruitment vendors like us. And I think I just was like, okay, maybe they all are just terrible. And it's not that they're terrible. It's that they're maybe less concerned with the site finding people to enroll and more concerned with hitting their payment milestones. So yeah, it was just great for me personally.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to guess, I mean, historically, a lot of the central recruitment campaigns have just been god awful. And I don't know whatever happened to Accurian, but that was like, they were the ones who seemed to get used for every study back in the day. And the leads were freaking terrible. Like the people that would come through didn't even have the diagnosis of the thing that they were, applying to. So sites just wasted a lot of time, or get patients who were supposed to have been pre-screened and you bring them in and they're just not even close to qualifying. So I think, yeah, there's been like a history of sites kind of getting burned by central recruitment companies. So it's kind of put them in a position to be like, I don't know about you. Apparently they're called AES now. Thank you, Dominique. So yeah, I just know that was, you know, my, and apparently they're still not particularly great. But anyways, yeah, that stuck with me for a long time because that seemed to be, they had all the business back in the day. And eventually got to a point where the sites, I would have to just be like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to do it. I mean, that's probably tough.
Fair. I think now they're rolled up into PPD, which is rolled up into Thermo Fisher, and it's all just kind of a giant research conglomerate. But I know that they also have their own network of sites. And one of the things I like to ask at conferences, instead of like, where are you from, is what's your most controversial opinion? And usually you can get people to come out of their shell a little bit on that one. And I don't even care if it's related to the industry. Sometimes you just get some wild stuff. But one guy was like teeing off on them basically like shutting out small independent sites because they're not part of their network, and to the detriment of the study, and knowing that sponsors probably don't know about that or just don't care that much as long as it gets done. So he was obviously with an independent site and feeling a little miffed.
I would have to think sponsors know that, because like there's like a lot of them that do that, right? Icon has, or there's Excelicare. I think they're owned by.
I think that's IQVIA.
Oh, is okay. See, I can't keep up with all the freaking M&A, so it's insane that all these people keep buying each other and becoming more profitable. I don't understand how a CRO can run a site network without that being some sort of like at least perceived conflict.
Yeah, that was his beef as well, and I don't know enough to know. Dunning-Kruger, I'll take the fifth.
That's the easy way out. You're supposed to just give a strong opinion even though you don't know anything. Yeah, but you've also got IRBs who are buying and operating patient recruitment companies. So apparently conflicts of interest aren't nobody really gives a shit. Just make money, right? It's good. That's vertical. It's called vertical integration. Okay.
There it is. I want my conflicts as boring as possible. No interest.
Right. Yeah. No, it's weird. That's interesting to me that I don't know, in case people don't know, I mean, I have my opinions about SCRS, but I do kind of regret not being able to have those conversations more with some of the site level people, because I think it's especially an interesting time for independent sites, to that guy's point, whoever that may have been, because you've got things like that going on, and then you've got these like crazy well-funded like integrated networks like Javara and Circuit Clinical and Eligo and whoever. And so like what's obviously you've still got academic medical centers, so what's happening to your independent, quote unquote independent sites and networks? I mean, I think that's kind of an interesting question.
Yeah, for sure. I will say that conference, like by a mile, had the most distributed representation between sponsors, CROs, and sites. And so the conversations were really, really different. One thing I'll just pump up because I thought it was cool, and it was probably the most encouraging thing I heard while I was there, was during their Site Tank presentation. Someone from UC Davis came on and said that they're basically piloting a CRC like 2-year program that's like half classroom and half go into the clinic and shadow people, but they're specifically targeting it towards community college students to kind of get them to trained up and then maybe back into lower income areas or whatever. And I just thought it was super cool. Like, it's going gangbusters. They won the competition. It doesn't really have any direct application for us, but I think it's pretty standardized. So they were saying it could be rolled out really anywhere.
Yeah, no, that is cool. And actually, not like I started out as like a bottom level research assistant, but there's a local community college who has a CRC program that was, again, from what I understanding at the time, one of the very few that existed, just a two-year program. And then, you go intern or extern, whatever the case may be, at a local site of some kind. I think it was even the first few years was funded, so like it was free, so people could go out there. Now, unfortunately, there's like nowhere to do research here, hardly, in the middle of the country. But I think it's important to have more and better not educated, but trained, site level folks, because, to your point, a lot of them get poached by CROs, and then you've ended up, you're kind of we're sort of shooting ourselves in the foot by making the, career opportunities at the site so limited that the best thing you can do is get out of the site as soon as possible and go work for a CRO, right?
Right. The optimal path is to get enough experience that someone will hire you and double your salary. Yes, that's optimal for you as an individual, not for the landscape as a whole. Maybe, I know I've heard from some folks, there's things like just in time recruiting where they set up a site, like especially for rare and oncology, in a place if there's a patient who's willing to be a part of it, and maybe there's room for traveling CRCs who can be deployed in a just in time fashion in places where there isn't enough population to warrant like a dedicated research site. I don't know. I'll leave it to some tech-funded startup.
Right. Well, and then, Lisa, to your point, a lot of people don't even know about CRC roles. So more education about the role is great. I don't disagree. I still feel like there's it's sort of, unfortunately, it's just so unbalanced. If I was, I don't like to travel. Frankly, if I don't have the, I don't know, I don't have it in me to be like a CRA. I just couldn't do the job. I would jump off of a bridge, I think. But for people who, want to continue to climb the ladder, so to speak, that's really the only thing to do. It's just, unfortunately, there's an imbalance there. I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to make working at a site more attractive, other than, frankly, just keep paying them more money. But obviously, we know how sites are under a lot of financial pressure. So again, you've sort of got this self-fulfilling prophecy. So people get out as soon as humanly possible.
Yeah, my wife has worked in public health and at nonprofit places. She's a nurse practitioner with a focus in HIV/AIDS and infectious disease. So she just constantly laments, yes, the quality of our staff will always be slightly less than the quality of hospitals or well-funded private clinics, because we're just frankly paying less. And so you get some people who are good and are in it for the love, they care about the patient population. And then you get a bunch of B- people who got rejected for jobs at those other higher paying institutions. And I think, outside of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, deciding to subsidize clinical research at that level, what can we do? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think they're, I don't know. Again, I get real mixed about it, because I think there could be, there's no reason sites have to be, sort of the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak. I think they're, whether that means, maybe it does mean more consolidation to the point to where, sites can call the shots more because there's just more leverage there. Even though, of course, I still love I'm an independent site. And I don't ever want to sell, but maybe there's some power and more consolidation. I don't know. I guess we'll see as things go forward. Are you hitting up any more conferences this season?
Yeah. So I got one more before the end of the year. I'm going to CNS, which we ignored at first because we thought it was central nervous system stuff, very specific. Okay. But apparently it's just not terrible if you're the head of CNS conference listening, but it stands for Collaborating for Novel Solutions.
I think they started out as a central nervous system, and then they rebranded and changed. And so they kept the acronym, but they kept the CNS, but changed what it stood for. I may be wrong.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Sleuths of the internet, please respond. It's a backronym then in that case. Yeah. So I'm going down there.
It's good portmanteau.
Yeah. Apparently it's pretty good. I don't love traveling away from my family, but I do like being in a room full of people, mainly because we work remote. So I'm in a room by myself all day. And just hearing folks, people are really smart. I sat at a lunch where this one guy who worked on NASH studies was telling two other site directors how to negotiate that they could keep the core biopsy on liver samples so they could use those patients in other studies down the road. And the guy was like, I didn't even know you could do that. So it was just really cool to hear people talking at a high level and sharing information. I really dig that. Plus I can bring back stuffed animals and things for my kids.
Nice. Yeah. You can't come back without something in hand. No,
Yes.
I'm with you. I do appreciate that about it, that you get such a diversity of thought, and for whatever reason, it seems like outside of those sites don't always talk as well as they should, because there's a lot we could do better with more of those conversations. So
Yeah.
well, very cool. Anything else before I boot you out of here?
No, good, man. Thanks for bringing me on.
My pleasure. All right. Well, I think we're about at the end of our hour or so here. If anybody else wants to jump in with some comments at the end, feel free. I see you there, Dr. Fox. You want to jump back on for a second? Too late. I put you on the spot.
Nope, I'm muted. I'm here. No, I love great guests, and I think that they were all spot on. Overall, SCRS was a good experience. It was a great first time. Got a pretty high bar to meet next year. I know they have a new tech one coming in June, I think. But the big one though is oncology. Last May, they said that 50% of all research by 2030 is going to be oncology, and I wouldn't be surprised. It's just growing exponentially.
Yeah. I thought it was even already close to that mark, which
It's got to be. So
yeah, we're sort of early on. We're doing oncology, but it's still fairly new to us. But I'll tell you that we've seen, like, we went from 0 to 100 faster than any other therapeutic area, because I think there is that need. I mean, I don't know how true this is. Somebody said that there's more oncology studies than there are oncology patients. I know that can't possibly. How can that be true?
well, that's where just in time started coming in. So they're literally, because of all the diversity and the mutations of the tumors and what you're trying to do, they're literally, there's going to be a time where they're going to have a trial for every patient coming in with oncology, because they try to, it goes back to tailored medicine, especially with like a lot of the CAR Ts and a lot of the technologies that they're doing. So on that note, if you are getting into oncology, I would hit up their oncology summit if you could afford it. That was the first one I went to. And it was funny because they were actually going by lanyards, right? So the sites had blue lanyards, and then there were orange lanyards for like CROs and vendors and the different lanyards. The blue lanyards, there were literally like 13 of them at the whole conference. Everyone else was a vendor. And it's like the stuff that they offered at that oncology summit, it was just perfect for anyone who's trying to get into oncology. If I'll ask SCRS for my check later. They give me my plug, but no, seriously, it was very beneficial to go to an oncology specific summit, especially since oncology is growing in this industry as a majority. So
yeah, that's good, and I'm honestly, I'll probably take that advice, especially since it's a new therapeutic area for us. It's a whole new world I'm learning.
Yep. So I think it was scheduled in January last year, but something happened, maybe like storms or something. They rescheduled it to May. I don't know when it is, but I guess I got to pay attention. If it's in January, we got to get flights in. But no, seriously, maybe you'll be there. Why not? I'd love to see you there.
All right. Well, I feel like I have to now. You've really forced my hand. All right. Very cool. Anything else on your mind before we got 5 minutes or so? Feel free. Take advantage.
Gosh. Minutes with Brad Hyde. So did you saw Dan's video?
Yeah, I think like I said, I only got about halfway through, I think.
Okay. Well, you didn't hit the spoiler alert. So they were talking about doing maybe a conference with some of the LinkedIn influencers at the end. Maybe we could have a meetup sometime.
I would love to see. Yeah, I would love to see something like that go down. Yeah. Just something that I don't know. Something that's well, I don't even know how to say it, but I think people working on the ground and really, really well tapped into what's going on at the specific site level. I would love to see that and be a part of it in any way that I can, for sure.
Yeah. And I think even us who, we try to be very vocal, there's some things that we're just not going to put on electronically. There's things that we're going through right now that I think that it'd just be better off to talk in person.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and look, there's a lot I don't know. I mean, I'm still. It's cool that we're seeing more like interaction between a lot of us who are being more vocal on here. But even then, like, I live in a fairly small world, so there's a lot that I haven't considered or seen or known. So the more we can all take advantage of each other's experience, the better off, we can all be.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Someone actually said that it's a new generation of clinical researchers. Someone called them like the pharmaceutical dinosaurs, some of those people who were kind of the old way, kind of keep your cards to your chest. It's competition. Everyone's against each other. And I mean, you can blame the millennials, you blame everything else on the millennials, but for some reason, clinical research is turning into much more of a consortium.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think it's been, it's encouraging. It's a really encouraging time where, again, more people aren't afraid to come out and say stuff because, yeah, it's been, even still, I think there are still a lot of people who are afraid to share, and they still have this sort of scarcity mindset of like, oh, someone else knows about it, then it somehow harms me, which is not true. Again, we can all benefit.
Yeah. So on that note, I appreciate the invite, Brad, and great job. We'll talk about collaborations later.
Yeah, hit me up. Thanks everyone who came on, Dr. Fox, Stephanie Abbott, Steve Wimmer. I really appreciate everybody. So, like, subscribe, comment, tell a friend, whatever. I really hope that we can help use my awkward platform to just continue to, again, share best practices and sort of talk through this stuff in a very practical way. So I really appreciate everybody who tuned in today, and until next time.